What's up guys, Metal571 here, and today we're going to be talking about the HIFIMAN HE4XX. This is an open back 35 ohm planar magnetic headphone from Massdrop, and let's get into the sound review. First of all, the bass is actually not quite as typical for a planar. So planars normally, if you don't know, have a very good bass extension way to a very low frequencies. They don't usually have a bump in the bass, but they usually have a flat measuring bass. And you know, I was kind of clued in by some frequency response graphs that might not be the case for this one, and it might be partially due to the pads. So I ran my own sine sweep, and with my ears I determined, not my mini DSP ears because I don't have that yet, but it's coming, I determined that this one in particular at least drops off significantly, starting at around 40 hertz, and as you go down it really dies out by 35 or less, which is kind of early for a planar. It's something that you can sort of correct with EQ, I would imagine, but I wonder if there's something going on with the seal. This thing comes with Focus A pads, which are a hybrid, velour on the inside and pleather on the outside. And at least I think they're Focus A pads. Someone can correct me if that's wrong. I don't think the 400i originally came with these pads. That might be why this headphone measures slightly differently. But anyway, regardless of why, this definitely rolls off a little bit early for a planar, so it's something to keep in mind. However, despite that, you still have the very low harmonic distortion, which is clear to me. If you're a bass head and you want lots of bass and you want to boost the crap out of the bass on this thing, I don't see a problem with that, except you may not want to destroy the driver. I don't know how much excursion these can do, but was definitely able to get it up to quite hilarious levels with zero clipping, no problems at all, and we're good. So if you like boosting your bass and you want the bass to be clean and not to harmonically distort or bleed into frequencies above the bass, then that's definitely a good headphone for you here. Other than that, I mean, a lot of what I did here was what I compared it to my new to me HE4XX, because I haven't quite owned enough of these Sennheisers already, guys, so I had to get another one. Now, actually, it's because I've been talking about the 6XX a lot on the channel, and I wanted to grab one because I don't have any 300 ohm Sennheisers anymore, but now I do. But anyway, because this headphone is usually about, I think it's 169 on Massdrop, and the 6XX, which is actually an HD650 in disguise, is 199. These two are quite the interesting comparison to be doing here. And in terms of the bass in particular on this headphone, yeah, you're going to get better bass extension, even though the bass still doesn't extend as far as you might think for a planar. But this is a pretty good introductory planar, but I'm getting ahead of myself anyway already. So down to the mid-range. The upper mids actually were quite a bit more forward on the 6XX than the HIFIMAN. And strangely, when I compare Tile's measurements, I don't see this at all. So this is something you can only really tell by listening to it, as far as I can tell. And so the 4XX has quite laid back upper mids, probably at least 3 or more dB less. And I'm talking about upper mids around 3.5K. And so as a result of that, you know, this kind of does that planar low mid warmth thing, whereas, you know, these Sennheisers, they tend to be, in my opinion, more natural sounding in the mids, and planars tend to have a kind of a flat line leading up to the mids, and sometimes you want there to be a little bit of a dip as you come down through the mids into the low mids, to sound a little bit more natural. So these have a little bit of warmth there that you wouldn't normally have, and by low mids I'm talking about like 500 hertz, something like that. And so there's a big difference there that I was kind of surprised by. So electric guitars and metal and things like that don't sound very harsh on these at all, at least in the mid-range. As far as detail retrieval, I mean, honestly, I don't think it's quite as good on this headphone than the Sennheiser, but that's, most headphones really. But it's perfectly fine. This price range, this thing's already winning nicely so far. And now let's get on to the treble, which is much more aggressive on the 4XX. This is a bright headphone. There's no way around it. If your reference is like me, the Sennheiser HD600 or 650, 6XX, then this is a bright headphone. And it may even be brighter than a DT880 as far as I remember. I don't actually have one on hand. And it really reminds me of the DT880 in the highs. It's quite diffuse field like. It's got basically 7K and 10K peaks is what I'm hearing, and I've corrected. And there's a little bit of boost in the air frequencies above 10K as well that I've had to adjust with EQ. So, you know, it kind of takes the EQ fairly well, but I still hear a little bit of a metallic character that I can't seem to remove by changing those peaks. So it's only so good. But again, for 169 in this case, I don't think that's a big deal. I think that, well, I'd be getting ahead of myself if I tell you what I think in the conclusion. So I will tell you totally what I think in a minute here. But before we get there, let's talk about the Soundstage next. And the Soundstage in this one, I don't think there's really a significant upgrade or a downgrade over the 650/6XX. It's a little different as far as I can tell, and it seems like the track you use, this thing changes and is a little bit different than the 6XX. I don't know how consistent it is in this, but at least with the test tracks I was using, which was very, very well recorded jazz that Tile used to use. I forget the name of it. I'll post it in my pinned comment that I usually do here. I noticed that essentially this was a little bit more intimate in terms of the width of the Soundstage, but the imaging was more fair, and that's normally the case actually when you compare things to the Sennheisers, because the Sennheisers always have that 3-blob kind of soundstage going on. What I mean by that is you get instruments here and you get instruments here. You don't really get instruments way out here, but you also get instruments in the middle of you, but you don't get as much in between the middle and that kind of intimate sides. And that's kind of how the Soundstage sounds on the Sennheisers, and on these it's a little smaller overall, I think, but the instrument placement is a little bit more fair, and there aren't really any holes in the imaging like you have with the Sennheiser necessarily. So that's what I heard. You guys know I'm not the best on Soundstage, but that's what I came up with here when I was demoing these. Now, so deal breakers, I'm kind of distilling the old stuff from my original format into that. The amp needs are still kind of, yeah, I would still say you probably need an amp with these. I think HIFIMAN originally introduced the 400i, which this is based on as far as I know, to be an easier to drive headphone that could be driven from a phone. I don't know if I agree with that. Despite the impedance, planers are still difficult to drive, and this seemed like it ate just about as much power as a 650. I'm sure you guys can comment more on that. I'm using a THX 789, which is being driven by a Topping D50 at the moment. I guess I'll make a review on that eventually since people wanted to see it. So, I mean, obviously I don't have any problems powering these, but I don't think you need much more than a Magni 3 or something like that. Should be plenty. Also, for comfort under deal breakers here, I thought that the earpad openings are just a little bit too small for my ears, but I think I have larger than average ears, so a lot of people probably won't run into this at all. That's just a personal thing. But other than that, the comfort is you can wear this thing forever. I think the headband they've got here, which is their older style headband rather than their new style one, is great. I mean, it's simple, it works. It doesn't need a lot of padding. The headphone's not very heavy actually for a planer, so it works pretty well. And so that brings me to the conclusions here. So what you have is you have a well-priced, somewhat equalizable headphone, and if you want to trade the some treble quality away from the Sennheiser to gain bass extension possibilities and bass levels and bass detail, if you're boosting the bass and you want bass, then this is the headphone you're looking for. I also found it particularly awesome with things that are very mid-forward in the mix. So like, if you're listening to metal, I think this is a great headphone. But if you're listening to EDM, that treble is kind of annoying. And even after you EQ it, like I said, there's some metallic ringing going on there that I'll never be able to find in a measurement. It's just something you can find after you EQ it and listen to it for yourself. And so I'm not so sure about EDM, which is kind of unfortunate because the bass here is great for that kind of stuff. But I guess if you don't mind the tuning here and you're not as sensitive to treble as I am, which I feel like most people are not as sensitive, then this is a fantastic headphone because for $169, wow, that's unbelievable. I mean, I'm pretty sure this used to go for $299 or more, and it sounds like it. It sounds like something HIFIMAN would put out at that price point. So this is a really awesome deal here, but you have to keep in mind the differences between it and the Sennheiser, because the Sennheiser to me definitely has a much more natural timbre to it and tuning in the mids and the highs than the HIFIMAN does without any EQ at all. But then you've got that bass issue that you can't really get rid of, because that's just the way the Sennheisers are. If you boost the bass on them, they will harmonically distort and it will become noticeable after a certain point, and planers are much better at dealing with that. So as you can see, depending on who you are, I think this is a great value. But even though I don't personally, it's another one of those headphones there, I wouldn't buy this. That's just me, and I think a lot of you guys will really like it, actually. The other thing you got to keep in mind is, from what I've heard, these are somewhat unreliable. Sometimes the drivers will die. I think that kind of caveat goes with a lot of planar magnetic headphones, though, so I certainly, obviously, have not had any issues with it. I've had multiple people in my old gaming clan buy one of these things and be amazed at it after EQ. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And so hopefully we'll see how those hold up. Some people have been luckier than others. But I think with the new headband or whatever, you're probably not going to have any headband issues. But the drivers may or may not last forever. So that is the HIFIMAN HE4XX. A little bit longer review than I think I wanted to do. But hopefully that gives you an idea of what it's like. And stay tuned for more reviews soon, like the Focal LX sitting right there. Take care.